Really, really pleased to welcome Mary Creagh MP for Coventry East, a former chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, well known to many people in this room, now Minister for Nature and the Circular Economy, and I can't think of anybody better to talk about the government's plans for restoring nature and moving to a more circular economy than Mary in her first speech as a minister. So, Mary.
Thank you very much indeed, Sean, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'm fresh from DEFRA oral questions. Daniel Zeichner is at the G20 in Brazil, so Emma Hardy, the Water Minister, and I have been answering a lot of questions on farming, which has been I feel like I'm just sort of coming down from that. It's lovely to be here in this room with all of you to celebrate your 45th anniversary. And look, if the Green Alliance didn't exist, we would have to invent it. And I pay tribute to you, Sean, for your exceptional leadership of this organisation and for all the work that you did in your previous life as well to protect and improve our environment. I'd like to thank you and the members of your Circular Economy Task Force and the Network for Social Change for today's event. And this event highlights the importance of driving forward action for nature's recovery hand in hand with the transition to clean energy, and of bringing people together with combined capabilities to do so. This government recognises the fundamental value of both, and our mission-based approach is designed to focus minds, promote innovation, and support join-up across objectives, policies, departments, and sectors. So we will do this through the 5 priorities set out by our Secretary of State, Steve Reed. We will, first of all, clean up Britain's rivers, lakes and seas. You've seen the tough new measures set out last week to stop the illegal pollution of our waterways. We will end the throwaway society and work towards a zero-waste economy where resources are reused and recycled, creating new jobs and investment, something that I am incredibly passionate about. We will support farmers to strengthen Britain's food security and boost rural growth, producing higher quality, sustainable food while restoring the natural environment. And we will speed up building flood defences and drainage systems to keep people and businesses safe, including through nature-based solution. And we will speed up nature's recovery. This is a critical time for the environment. It has never been more important to protect and support and restore nature. Almost half of our bird species and a quarter of our mammal species that have been assessed are at risk of national extinction. Precious landscapes in our national parks are in decline, and our rivers, lakes and seas are awash with sewage. And I want to just say a very brief word about the previous government. We have the Darcy review out today talking about the NHS being in critical care and essentially being on life support. We've had the despoilation of our rivers. We've had underspends in the farm budget. We've got our prisons bursting. We've got the criminal justice system. All the problems are well documented. And what we've got is the legacy of 14 years of Conservative government, and this is going to be something which is going to take a lot to turn around. This is a blot on the nation's conscience, the crisis of nature, and on its balance sheet. The Office for National Statistics reports that the UK's directly measurable natural capital has an asset value of £1.5 trillion. It provides an annual flow of benefits to the UK economy of £47 billion. It is a major source of national wealth, and nature is the monopoly provider of everything we need to exist, and it is part of the solution to many of the challenges posed here today. So nature's value is central to each of the missions that define this new government. We know access to nature can promote well-being and tackle poor mental health. that cleaner air can help cut hospital admissions, protecting landscapes that capture and store carbon helps us meet our net zero targets, and training people for new jobs in restoring and protecting the natural world promotes economic growth. Nature underpins everything. Without nature, there is no economy, no food, no health, and no society. So nature-based solutions like restoring peat, planting trees, and natural flood management deliver multiple benefits for climate, biodiversity, and people. They can and should play a critical role in our plans to tackle the interrelated climate and biodiversity crises. Such nature-based policies can also help us adapt and ensure resilience to climate change. They support water quality and provide natural beauty, which we should cherish in its own right. You all know we are seeing the effects of climate change already. The impacts of extreme weather across the UK are profound. Record amounts of rainfall over an 18-month period between October 2022 and April 2024, posing a significant impact to the 1 in 6 properties that are at risk of flooding. The July 2022 heat wave was virtually impossible without human-induced climate change, with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees across the United Kingdom. This resulted in the highest number of heat-related excess deaths in any given year. Network Rail have experienced $3 billion of weather costs over the last 15 years. 120 million of that we've had 120 million to repair damage to 350 kilometres of road and 720 bridges from the 2015 Storm Desmond across Cumbria and Lancashire. So all of our major infrastructure is under threat from climate change. And the frequency, we know, of hotter summers will increase in the future, and we can expect winters to become wetter. This makes flooding more likely across the UK. It will drive health risks, damage houses and infrastructure, and harm the natural environment, and disrupt international supply chains. We need to build new flood defences, plan with and for more green spaces to help keep people cool, and consider the crops we grow and the infrastructure we build to withstand the expected climate impacts such as drought, extreme heat and flooding. And we should look at the benefits too. Adaptation will help us make the most of any opportunities that may arise, including securing water resources, improving crop yields in dry land farming, and protecting coastlines. We want to ensure that our children and their children have the future they deserve, rich in nature and opportunity wherever they live. And that is why we've announced a rapid review of the Environmental Improvement Plan to complete before the end of the year. We will work hand in glove with stakeholders across this audience and society who have the expertise and experience to make sure the plan is fit for purpose and that it delivers, harnessing your creativity and insights. And I had a submission in my box this week and it said, you should hold a stakeholder roundtable in September. And I did point out we're halfway through September and we can't just organise it, but we will be holding a stakeholder event in the middle of October to discuss the environmental impact plan and the environmental improvement plan and how we're going to work with you and is it fit for purpose. So, watch this space. We will deliver the Environment Act targets in England, halting the decline in species abundance by 2030, and we will honour our international agreements to protect 30% of the UK's land and seas by the same date. I'm keen to hear attendees' view on one of our priorities, moving to a circular economy. For our part, DEFRA will establish a circular economy task force with members from industry, academia, civil society to lead the development of a circular economy strategy. The strategy will be underpinned by a series of roadmaps detailing the interventions that government will make on a sector-by-sector basis. Extended producer responsibility for packaging is a vital first step. It will create 21,000 jobs, stimulate more than £10 billion of investment in the recycling sector over the next decade, and see packaging producers, rather than us as taxpayers, covering the costs of managing waste. We are also committed to delivering the Deposit Return Scheme, DRS, a redeemable deposit on single-use in-scope drink containers. This will reduce litter, increase recycling rates, create high-quality recyclate for producers, and promote a circular economy. We are on track to deliver DRS in October 2027. This will create a future where we keep our resources in use for longer. Waste is reduced, we accelerate the path to net zero, we see investment in critical infrastructure and green jobs, our economy prospers, and nature thrives. But essentially, there hasn't been much new policy in the waste sector, and it's something that I've pressed on very hard in opposition and as chair of the Environmental Audit Select Committee. On planning reform and nature, there is a lot of work to do. Alongside protecting and improving the natural environment, we were also elected on a mandate to get Britain building again. We must accelerate infrastructure delivery to build the homes, schools, transport links, and green energy infrastructure we need. This will not only help to grow our economy and create new jobs right across the country, but will also materially improve people's lives. When it comes to the planning system's role in providing the nature and infrastructure we need, we know that the status quo is not working, and we are determined to transform the system to ensure a win-win for house building and nature. We want to use the value gained from enabling development to proceed quickly and smoothly to support nature recovery, and to do so in a way that gives everyone involved greater certainty. This includes ensuring biodiversity net gain as a key part of the picture works as it is intended to work, and I'm watching it very closely as it beds into the planning system. That is why we will continue a constructive dialogue alongside colleagues from DESNES and MHCLG in particular over the coming months as to the best way forward. We will also restore the UK's international credibility and leadership, playing a leading role in driving forward action to address the triple planetary crises of climate change, nature loss and pollution. For this government, being back on the world stage means putting nature at the forefront of the global agenda. Next month, the CBD COP16 in Cali, Colombia, I always feel like we're sort of talking acronyms. So the Conference on Biodiversity is in Colombia, and it will be our first opportunity to review our collective global progress against the goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We are committed to ensuring successful outcomes at COP16, working alongside partners such as yourselves to build on the success of COP15. For our part, the 4 nations of the UK, the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies have worked together to submit our national targets on time on the 1st of August. We outlined a range of policies and strategies that commit us to meeting all 23 of the Global Biodiversity Framework targets here at home. But it's clear to me that there is much more to be done for nature's recovery. And that is why we will publish the full UK National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, the so-called NBSAP, in due course, detailing further delivery plans and future ambitions. And I was talking to the Joint Nature Conservation, JNCC, about this Conservation Committee, which coordinates responses from all 4 nations just this week. Of course, whether at home or abroad, nature recovery relies on predictable and sustainable sources of finance. And that is why I am delighted that the UK has played a leading role in progressing negotiations ahead of COP16 on a new global fund, a fund that will share the financial benefits that private sector companies derive from their use of genetic sequence data. That data is already being used in products all around the world, from shampoos to dyes. but all too often the profits from its use are not being shared with those communities that nurtured the plants and animals from which that data was taken in the first place. I hope that COP16 will see agreement to a significant fund that will go some way to ensuring that nature's wonders remain available to future generation of innovators. And we will also, at COP16, also see the outputs of the Independent Advisory Panel on Biodiversity Credits, a joint but independent UK-French initiative which will make recommendations on how businesses can invest in nature in just and equitable ways. We need urgent action. We will face constraints, including on resources, but I'm here today to hear your thoughts and ideas for better ways of working, to find creative solutions for helping us in this huge, ambitious and vital mission. We are just, I think, 10 weeks into this new government. I'm 8 weeks into being appointed as the first ever Minister for Nature, and we are developing pathways and plans for achieving our ambitions. But I can tell you, this government is committed to a Britain that is reconnected with our international and domestic partners. Nature will get its voice back at the very heart of government, and we will extend that partnership to working with you, listening to your expertise and experience so that we can shape policy and create the regulatory environment needed to succeed. Hand in hand with nature recovery, we can drive the transition to clean energy and a circular economy. I'm optimistic, and I hope you all are too, and I look forward to a good discussion with you. Thank you. You go and sit down.
That was great. Thank you, Mary. And although I think under the last 14 years there were highlights as well as lowlights, it's been fantastic to sense the kind of energy and the ambition and also the openness to working with the sector and beyond under the new government. So we really welcome that. I'm going to ask a few questions, then we'll have discussion on questions from the floor. I was really interested in your point about the value of nature, and the other side of that is the cost of depleting nature. And one of the things the last government did was commission the Dasgupta review, which I think a lot of people hope would have the same impact as the Stern review and kind of mainstream consideration of nature into economic decision making. It was pretty well shelved. Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, didn't attend the launch. I think he sent Kemi Badenoch. It didn't really have very much energy from the centre. Is Dasgupta part of your thinking, or is it just that we kind of mainstream the value of nature in other ways without, as it were, dusting down his extremely comprehensive report?
Well, it was a report that was worthy of a Nobel Prize. I mean, it was very detailed and analytical, and I think one of the challenges is how do we translate that into workable policy. It is most certainly not shelved, but I think it's a foundational document, yep, clearly, and a landmark review. But how do we are on a journey in the same way that we've been on a journey around climate change and how we value carbon. We are on a journey, and we are in the infancy of how we measure and report on nature, which is why I referenced in the speech the international panel that is looking at this, because they want to avoid, I think, some of the pitfalls that have befallen the emissions trading schemes and the value of carbon. So how can we make nature investable? How can we do it in a way that is not greenwashing? How do we make sure that it isn't, that offsetting is real? You know, how do we make sure that where we are building the biodiversity net gain, where does it happen? There's some quite deep philosophical and theoretical discussions that need to go on around that. And I've asked, you know, and I'm having these discussions with officials, as you can imagine now, but I want to have them in a much bigger room and feed in the genius of this group. Great, thank you. Well, Green Alliance happens to have a project on this, so we might come up with some answers for you. Excellent. Just going back to the UK nature, and I take your point about there's so much to be done, and you're relatively new, and these are really difficult questions. But one of the
positive things the last government did was move to a system of public money for public goods in farming policy. But obviously reforming the CAP is a huge task, moving from one system to another. And there was often a sense that farming policy wasn't joined up with nature policy, but the main levers you have to restore nature in the UK or in England are through farming policy. And I just wonder if there's kind of institutional ways you're going to try and break down those silos.
So what I would say on that is, first of all, there was a huge underspend in the farming budget. So the last government did not spend £2.4 billion a year on farmers. They broke their own manifesto promise on that. What we are clear is, and now the schemes are, you know, they were in there. It's been a huge structural shock to the farming sector. The EU exit, it has affected exports, it has affected veterinary medicines availability, it has, and then of course the energy crisis, which has really impacted on farmers' input costs as well, and then this year's flooding. So there's been it's been a very difficult time for farmers, I think, and attending the Back British Farming debate yesterday in Parliament, it was clear that, you know, there's a great sense of hope around what this government will be able to deliver and to sort of have a proper plan for farming. And what Daniel Zeichner, my colleague, the Farm Minister, has been clear about is that, you know, we want to ensure that the money flows to the places in particular that have missed out over the last 3 years. So that's small farms, that's tenant farmers, that's upland farmers, where there is the greatest scope for nature restoration and recovery. And so it's about making sure that farm policy goes hand in hand with the nature recovery policy. And that is something that Daniel and I are in lockstep on.
Great, thank you. Well, that's music to our ears. Just the last one. I'm not sure, do you cover adaptation?
No, that's Emma, because of the floods.
I won't ask you.
But ask me a bit on that. Go on.
Well, I just think
come on, I used to do it.
The test is, I mean, adaptation is going to become more and more prominent as an issue in the next 5 years as climate change begins to bite. And there's a real sense that it's a Cinderella within government and a Cinderella within DEFRA.
Well, it has been.
Yeah, has been. Okay.
Has been. Yeah.
Is that likely to change?
Well, so we've got the.
There's a soft question for you.
That's well. Look, what I've got notes here that say. It says here. We are, so the national adaptation, look, this is something I was really hot on as EAC chair.
Yes,
so, and so the three things that I looked at as EAC chair were flooding, which is the greatest risk the country faces from climate change, overheating, which has a massive impact, particularly as we have an older population and a sicker population, and really affects hospitals and care homes in particular, but affects all of us and anyone who works outside, and then alien invasive species. So those were the three sort of strategic looks. I didn't get to, there were 5 things and I only got to 3 of them, sadly, but I'm sure Toby Perkins, the new chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, will be keen to pick up that work. So there is currently a live judicial review against the National Adaptation Programme, which was obviously the work of the previous government, and it was brought by Friends of the Earth. So this is about setting the objective. So we are awaiting the judgment of that, as this may sort of force us or may instruct us to address deficiencies in the previous approach. So we're going to wait to see what that judgment says, and we're going to look at that and feed that into our new target setting approaches. But I can tell you, my history with adaptation means that I am very alive to the risks posed by a changing climate, and I think we have to, we will be looking at that in due course.
Great, thank you. Let's go to questions. I shortchanged this side of the room last time, so let's have a few here, and we'll do it round to 2. Hold your questions on the circular economy for a moment, okay? So right by you at the back, Katie.
Hi, Karina from Feedback, a food systems NGO. We all know that none of this can happen without food waste prevention. The IPCC agree it's a critical part of the transition to a sustainable economy. So does the Climate Change Committee, so did Henry Stimbleby's food strategy. The previous government did nothing about food waste prevention, with a real preference for voluntary measures, consumer awareness, wishy-washy, pretending that supermarkets dumping their food surplus was addressing the environmental crisis linked to food waste. So I'm wondering, what mandatory measures will this new government be putting in place to end the scourge of food waste? Thank you.
I think we might already be on the circular economy, actually. But,
Straight in.
oh, God, the lady in blue. Just...
Ruth Chambers, Green Alliance. Thanks, Sean, for your usual cheekiness.
No hard questions, Ruth.
Mary, it was great to hear all of those comments, and I guess I've got a couple of thoughts ruminating in my head. One is the challenges that we're facing to meet our 2030 binding nature targets. They're very similar to some of those that Chris articulated earlier. Do you think we need emission control for nature? And while you're thinking about that, the second part of the question is great to hear you talk about bringing the UK back into the international nature space. Could you say a little bit about how you plan to tackle our global nature footprint?
Okay, well, can I just come back on those two things first of all, just because while I've got them in my head. So first of all, you're right about 30 by 30 is a challenge, and we are looking at that. But what I would say is that this fund that we're trying to do is actually going to be a game changer if we can land it. And it is Britain that is in the driving seat on this. And you know, one of the reasons that I was really keen to come here today is because most people don't know about it. I can never remember, it's another acronym, digital, you see, I've got it wrong already, Digital Sequencing Information, DSI. Ruth knows, other Ruth knows, but it's one of those things where we've thought it up. It's really going to be incredible if we can land it, but we're not there yet. So for those of you who are going to be in Cali, Colombia, if you can start sort of banging the drum and making the case for that in your organisations, because it's the companies that we need to bring with us who are going to be paying into this. And I'm not, you know, so we will see. On the, and you're right about the 30 by 30. Again, like no policy, there's been, you know, things that Hilary Benn, when I was Shadow Secretary of State in 2010, I said to Hilary Benn, you know, what do we need to, you know, what do you think still in flight? What should we be pressing on? And he chucked out a couple of ideas. We talked about a closed season for hares. We talked about banning timber from landfill. And here we are 14 years later, and those are still live questions. You know, it's like 14 years has happened, people, you know. In the long run, as you know, as the economists say, we're all dead in the long run. So we've got to take action swiftly, and we've got to sort of have a drumbeat for nature, which is the beating heart of the country. You know, we have got to get our policies joined up together. We have got to channel our funding so it works better for nature, and we have got to use all the additional levers. But we cannot do it. Government cannot do it on its own. It's a bit like climate change. It is not the job of government to do this on its own. The job of government is to give regulatory certainty, to crowd in finance, to create investability platforms so that the private sector has the confidence to invest. And that is where I think some of the thinking is in its infancy, but some of the big thinking, back to the Sculptor Review, has not been built upon because you know, there's been the distractions of Brexit and the distractions of infighting. Just on food waste, look, I think it's unacceptable that we have wasted food, and there was some work done on this, but our circular economy task force is going to develop a circular economy strategy. This is going to be underpinned by long-term sector roadmaps, and it will focus on opportunities to support economic growth and accelerate towards net zero. And food waste is an abomination, really, in a country where we have so many children growing up in poverty. Green Alliance is one of the stakeholders that we have invited to join our task force, and an invite went to Libby Peak on the 9th of September. So this is all, it's all literally live happening now.
Hot off the press.
I don't know if it's arrived.
It has.
Excellent, that's good. So the system is working. So we're going to look at different sectors of the economy, and I did 2 debates in the House of Commons last week as well on, oh God, I'm getting ahead of the circular economy questions, but I just want to say...
Don't worry, I've given up on that.
You can't control these people. That's the beauty of it. So we did debates on fly tipping and we did debates on waste crime. So I've had a sort of deep dive into both of those areas. And, everybody's environment starts at their front door. Okay, it's, the environment isn't something that only lives in protected landscapes. And we have a job to bring nature closer to people, but we also have a job to make sure that people understand their impacts on their own environment, whether that's place-based littering, the impact of fly tipping, the so-called broken window syndrome, where someone fly tips an armchair, then someone fly tips the windows that have been pulled out, and then pretty soon you've got mattresses, fridges, and I won't tell any of my jokes because we've got press here, but I'll tell you afterwards. The sofa in the front garden, sofas are hazardous waste. We need to work out what we're going to do around that. So some of the things that might be dearest to our hearts may not be the biggest waste issues facing us as a nation. And so we are looking at how we're going to tighten up the permitting and carrier regulations, because as I said in my debate last week, we had a dead dog called Oscar who registered on the Environment Agency's waste registration system to be a waste carrier. That was 10 years ago. And I'm not sure it's much better now. We have paper-based waste permits in a digital age. The opportunities for fraud are massive. The losses to the economy are huge. And it's a lot easier to defraud the waste system than it is to deal in drugs or to traffic people. So, this is the problem that we face. So we look at the waste system as well as the bits at the front end. We have to make sure that the back end is fit for purpose as well.
Great, thank you.
Oh, there's millions.
Oh, second row, Harriet, and then I'll go to Helena.
Thanks very much, Harriet Lamb from RAP, and obviously we're cheering your focus on tackling waste and resources and the circular economy. And I wanted to ask you how much you felt the enthusiasm that you and the Secretary of State clearly have. How much is that shared across government, and particularly in Treasury and the departments that are putting such a focus on growth? Are they seeing that as green growth, and what could we do to make sure that that does happen? And I was wondering whether you'd thought about something like, if you look at Wales, second best recycling nation in the world.
Second best?
Second best, pretty good.
Who's best?
Austria.
Okay.
The Future Generations Act has obviously been one of the pillars that's helped make sure that thinking about the circular economy, about nature, runs through everything they do. And I wondered if that was something you might consider.
Thank you. We'll take a few. So along the row, what's happened to the microphone? Have you got the microphone? Oh, there.
Okay, hello. There's a couple of
You
issues.
want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, I'm Helena Horton from The Guardian. There are a couple of issues the Tories found it hard to kind of tackle when they were in DEFRA. One of them was that all of their advisors, Natural England, Henry Denby, said that we have to eat and produce less meat if we're going to have the land sector meet net zero, the farming sector and everything else. Will you be able to say that with confidence, because it's quite politically difficult? And secondly, I know you were interested in peat when you were EAC, I believe. And they've put a massive loophole in the moorland burning ban, which means that it's still happening in quite a substantial way. Will you close that loophole and ban the burning of moorland?
I'm really tempted to take your notes away, Mary, and just get...
Well, I don't have a note on peat, but I want to just say a couple of things. So I have had a deep dive on peat, as you know, because obviously it's, as you know, a subject very close to my heart. And let's just say I've probably got a higher appetite to do something on peat than the previous government has, this government has. And I think in terms of the peat strategy, because obviously there's the issue around the banning of horticultural peat as well. So, Harriet, to your point about legislation, we have introduced 40 bills already, and we've only actually been in Parliament about 3 weeks. So, you know, that's why we all look a bit, that's why we're a bit tired. But the legislative programme is packed and huge. We are nationalising the railways. We are setting up GB Energy. You know, there is a lot of good stuff that is happening. And so we have to take our part in the legislative queue. So things like the ban on horticultural peat. You know, the programme is so packed. The days of Parliament knocking off at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon are well and truly over, let me tell you. And, you know, we haven't come into government to do nothing and to defend the status quo. That's what I can say. But what I have said is so in my enforced sabbatical over the last 5 years, I've been doing a bit of work with Cranfield, and I've been working with civil servants and talking about sustainability. And I used to always give them what's called an ease impact matrix. And I think it's a really useful way of thinking, what is it that is easy to do and what has the greatest impact? And sometimes the things that we campaign on or the things that are top of mind because of what we see on the television may not be the most impactful things. So I've sort of sent them away and said, show me where the impacts are going to be greatest and what can we do now on peat? And they are going to come back to me on that very shortly. So watch this space on peat. On the Future Generations Act, I mean, look, at Wales is brilliant. I'm thrilled. I've met with Hugh Iranka-Davies, who I've worked with in the House of Commons in the EFRA brief. He is their minister. We have been talking about how we're going to work better together. But we're back to the thing. It wasn't in our manifesto, but I think, you know, it's certainly something that's worth pursuing in the future.
And will this government be braver on just saying we need to eat less meat if we're going to tackle climate change?
Oh, on the meat thing, look, food is Daniel's area. So I'm going to neatly dodge that. What I would say is that we do not have a position. But just on the farming point, you know, the Australia trade deals where the previous government basically sold British farmers and their high environmental and welfare standards down the river to do a deal with Australia to make some sort of point post-Brexit. We have been clear that we want to protect high animal welfare standards, high environmental land standards as we go forward, and we will be fighting British farmers' corners in any future trade deals.
Thank you. Some more, so lots of journalists. Colin, Colin, and then I'll come to you, Adam, and by the end, don't worry.
Colin Fernandez, Daily Mail. What is the government's position on rewilding? It wasn't in the manifesto. Boris Johnson was keen to build back beaver. Therese Coffey came along and said she wasn't keen on rewilding, an NFU conference. Where does the Labour Party stand? I mean, would you be keen to see lynx back in the British countryside?
Great, thank you.
Lynx.
There's somebody in the third row, lady in the third row. Actually, two in the third row. We'll take those together and then come back to you. So rewilding.
Hi, thank you. Nina from Suez. Great to hear about your commitment to the DRS scheme. As part of that, will you be looking at batteries? As I'm sure you're aware, they're a real nuisance in the waste and resources sector. Thank you.
Colin.
Just look, battery. Let's just go straight to batteries. They are a nightmare. It's the WE directive, isn't it? The waste and environmental. We have a big problem with electronic waste. We consume more electronic. I mean, I'm just talking from memory, so please fact check with the DEFRA press office on this. But I think we use, like everyone's getting twitchy. I think we consume more, you know, we've got something like 2 or 3 phones for every person in the country. They're all sitting in our drawers. I've got an ancient BlackBerry, don't report that. But we have to get better at getting this stuff out, because mining the minerals in that is going to be really important as part of being, as the pressure on critical minerals grows into the future, and is going to be part of our circular waste strategy, I think. So batteries can just spontaneously combust, is my understanding, in your facilities. I think I'm trying to come to one of your facilities. I'm trying to organise a visit to see you very soon. But in my debate last week, I did make the plea. It's not just a little battery from your hearing aid or your weighing scales. These things can cause massive fires, and it all adds to the costs of dealing with. We should stop calling it waste. We should start calling it materials. We should rebrand waste as materials. It's plastics, it's metal. And I would like to personally see the supermarkets putting their battery recycling points a little bit more visible, because they're always hidden behind, point of sale stuff. And it's almost like they don't want to have to deal with the costs themselves. On links, look, Colin, all I can say is no one's mentioned the links to me. But I think there's it's about bringing the sectors together to speak a common language. So, the environment NGOs want to talk about rewilding, the farmers want to talk about sustainable farming, and actually, can we make those two things go hand in glove together? I haven't had a briefing on beavers, but what I would say is that agroforestry, which is where farmers plant their crops, sort of interspersed with greater trees and more hedgerows, has an important part to play as part of the DEFRA's contribution to tackling climate change. So again, that is something that we will be looking at in the round.
Thank you. Can you pass the, yeah.
Hi, thanks. Colin Church, and I'm the chair of the Green Alliance Circular Economy Task Force, and I'm also from the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining. And I'm going to ask you two questions that link those two things, I'm afraid. So the first one is, can you say a little bit more about how you envisage your Circular Economy Task Force, if only it was called something different, working, and how it's going to work with ministers, and what you see coming through that process? And then secondly, so you've mentioned critical materials, which is a really good thing to hear mentioned, and clearly a more circular economy for critical materials is going to be really important. But also, there's a bit of a concern that that's going to require quite a lot of infrastructure. And where's DEFRA thinking in terms of the nature balance and the circular economy balance in managing that kind of potential interaction? So if you need to build a recycling plant somewhere, where's the nature conversation around that? If you need to open a new mine to get some new materials, where's the nature conversation? Where's the thinking on how that's going to balance out?
And is the question down, yes, there. I don't know why I keep picking journalists, but they're very powerful. Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, it's Victoria Seabrook from Sky News. You talked about the importance of biodiversity net gain. You said you're in constructive dialogue with DESNZ about the impact of their building. Chris Stark was just talking about the need to level with the public about how much infrastructure needs building. Are you concerned about the impact of all of this on the UK's nature? And if not, should you be?
Oh, thanks. Well, I think I want to. I think I want to take those two things together, because so my brief is, I look after forests, circular economy, planning and land use, and international nature and biodiversity, and the arm's length body. So those are my four big things. And in some ways, those questions go beautifully together, because it's about biodiversity. Now, I was sceptical about biodiversity net gain, which has happened very recently, and it's a very new policy. But having had a briefing on it, just a short hour, so I'm beginning to understand the ways that it can help us with trade-offs. So of course, we do not want to be building a plastic recycling plant, in a national park, or, so that's the first thing. We should not be building this infrastructure in protected landscapes and areas of very, very high value. If we have to, because of reasons of resilience or whatever, then biodiversity net gain gives us a mechanism for making sure that nature is replaced and improved in either nearby, or that there is money and funding allowed to allow the government to invest in it. And so I think it could be a useful mechanism, but the point is that we shouldn't be building these things on triple SIs and special protected areas. That should not be happening, and they are protected for a reason, and it is important that those protections remain.
Take Adam Vaughan from Times, then lady in the second row, and then man in the front row. And I should, by the way, say, we do welcome the Circular Economy Task Force being set up.
Hi, Mary. It's Adam Vaughan from the Times. Two questions. One question, you mentioned you've got a lot of action going on water pollution. However, in response to a story I did a couple of weeks ago, your department talked of an ambitious clean air strategy, but I can't see anything online or anywhere about that. What's it actually going to include, and will it include action on wood-burning stoves? Second question is, you talked about nature and farming. How can we take your pledges on nature seriously when you're not ruling out cuts to the £2.4 billion farming subsidy budget, which is designed to make farming more nature-friendly?
Okay, well, just straight into the spending review, what I would say is we've got a £22 billion black hole in our country's finances. So I've just been in DEFRA questions with the Conservatives, asking about the spending review. Tempting though it is to sort of make promises, we have to wait until October the 30th for that. But what I will say is that we want to focus. We want to make sure that farmers are supported and that we have food security on a and sustainability for the rural communities, and we are committed to doing that. We are committed to delivering a clean air strategy, but we are in the very early stages of shaping its scope. And what I would say is that the last year's 2023 air quality strategies, which local authorities and their air quality partners need to take regards, says that local authorities should use their powers to contributing towards meeting the Environment Act targets on PM 2.5.
Lady in the second row. I should just say, I think everybody in this room understands the budgetary constraints. I think we all think that it would be very much harder to meet the climate and nature targets with a cut to the farming budget, but you probably know that.
Thank you. Rosie Beardmore from the Woodland Trust. I just wanted to know how DEFRA is intending to work with all departments to achieve nature's, firstly, protection, which is very important to us, and recovery. And will the land use framework play a cross-departmental role in achieving this?
Sorry, can you say your question? I missed the first bit of it.
Can you explain how DEFRA will be working with all departments to ensure nature's protection, firstly, and recovery, secondly?
You want to take the front row as well first, then?
Thank you. Jeff Brighty from Mura Technology. We're an advanced recycler of waste plastics. I'm just interested in your views on advanced recycling to generate material for the circular chemicals economy, and in particular, in relation to technology advancement in the UK, where we're building our first plant and it's in commissioning now, but we're looking to invest here, potentially also elsewhere. So really, where's the driver coming in from DEFRA to improve the resources and waste management strategy, which is now about 6 years old? Thank you.
So just to go back on the planning reform, we are in lockstep with Matt Pennycook, who of course was former Shadow Minister for Climate Change. So he has nature and climate very much in his sights as the new Minister for Housing and Planning Reform. We want to have a better planning system that unlocks the land we need for housing and infrastructure, because the country needs it. But we think that local nature recovery strategies can play an important part in this, in terms of bringing nature closer to people, and where they can target nature recovery in their own local areas as well. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill will accelerate house building and infrastructure delivery, and it will use development to fund nature recovery, where currently both are stalled. So hopefully we'll get a win-win outcome for the economy and for nature, because we know that we can and we must do better than the status quo. But we will only act in legislation where we can confirm to Parliament that the steps we are taking will deliver positive environmental outcomes. Just on the chemical recycling thing, I'm going to be really frank. I just don't understand chemical recycling. So I need you to tell me everything about it.
But not now.
But not now. It is starting, you know, I've had about 2 or 3 letters and things, and I'm just like, talk to me about chemical recycling. I think it's a glimmer in the eye of the waste team as we try and tackle the backlog of, you know, 14 years of policy stasis. But I'm very pleased that you're investing. I'm very keen to hear. Just please write to me. Let me know what you need and what would be helpful for you in the future. Yeah, I think you might have, yes.
So, Guy, wave, guys. There's, and
Thank you. Guy Thompson from Mentrade and Wessex Water. I just wanted to offer a couple of questions linking the previous conversation about clean power to this discussion around nature recovery. The first is going back to Ruth's question on the mission. And I was just reflecting, I'm conscious, Minister, you weren't in the room, you were battling it out at oral questions, but Chris Stark provided a brilliant exposition of the clean power mission and how it will provide that investor prospectus and that opportunity to pump prime the economic growth. And I think if we're honest ourselves in this room, we are miles and miles away from having the equivalent mission for nature recovery. So I guess the question is how we can, between us, engender that same level of clarity and mission and energy that will drive that and catalyse that pan-Whitehall action across the economy. And then secondly, reflecting on the learnings, I think, of what it's taken to drive investment, private investment in offshore wind and renewable energy in particular. You talked about the role of government in catalysing that private investment. The EIP review strikes me as an immediate opportunity to look again at the long-term targets in the way that we've had those clear, loud, long legal policy signals from the renewable energy to catalyse action on nature recovery. It will require you to look, I think, at how you can take those existing targets and enable them to drive collaboration across the economy and also give them local expression where we have the opportunity to do so.
Thanks, guys. There's only time for one more. Lady in the back row, and I'm afraid that we're going to have to then finish it.
Thank you. Bethan Lachlan from the Zoological Society of London. I wanted to touch on your international brief. As you've mentioned, we have COP16 that is imminently approaching in Cali, and it's wonderful to hear that the MBSAP is being published. Would love to know more. But as you know, COP29, the UNFCCC's meeting, is just a few weeks after. And you've said in your speech a commitment to integrating climate and nature.
Yeah.
I would like to know more about how you're doing that on the international stage within the negotiations. And when we're building our MBSAP, how is the government going to be integrating climate commitments into our nature commitments? Thank you.
Pretty big questions.
It's all meaty, and I feel like we could have all day together. So what I would say is that I'll be at both COPs, and the next year's climate COP in Brazil is going to be the big sort of tree, forestry, and nature COP, and we are very, very alive to that. And I think one of the problems is that it's the structural setup of the United Nations system, which says, you know, carbon's over here, nature's over here, and people's over here. And so, you know, NGOs deal with nature, they deal with carbon, they deal with people. And so it's like, but everything is interconnected. It's a whole systems approach. So I think we're at the, you know, at the early stages of that. But I think, you know, DEFRA has what it needs to contribute as part of our climate roadmaps, and we need to make sure that we are on track. I ran an audit committee, so one of the things that I've already pushed back with officials is stop telling me percentages of this and percentages of that and miles of hedgerow, because I want to see I want one unit of measurement. Because otherwise, if you have lots of different numbers, it's all meaningless. What does 30% protected by 2030 look like? What does that mean in mathematical hectares? And how do the hedgerows and the coastlines and how does everything feed into that? So I think we are going to be working on improving, and I've also fed back precisely on the issue that you raised, Chris, around interim targets. The reason why we've got investability in carbon and decarbonisation is because we sent really clear signals to the markets that this is what was going to happen. And we do not have those interim targets, which is why the Secretary of State, Steve Reed, has asked for that rapid review to see if it's fit for purpose. You know, you can have a target for 2042, but you're not going to do it all in 2041. And of course, it's a bit like And it's always best to do stuff up front first quickly so that you get the benefits. You know, it's like early money and early achievements are sort of worth more in carbon terms than they are sort of decarbonising at the end. So is there I bet it's equivalent for nature as well. So I've been very keen on the Environmental Improvement Act to see those interim targets coming in, to crowd in and to co-create with you. Steve is a cooperative MP. He's very keen on co-creation. So we're not sitting here saying we've got all the answers, and I certainly don't on chemical recycling. But I do, having been on the other side of the fence and just really struggled with some of the numbers and what does it all mean? It all sounds good, but it isn't really good. We know it's not really good. I want us to get to a place where we can have confidence in what the numbers look like, where business can have confidence that where they invest, it will pay back dividends, and that we set. And some of the work that we are doing on nature investability is going to potentially be the global standard setting. So we've always been respected for this internationally, and we can do it again together. We've got great people in this room. All of you are great people. Let's harness your intelligence and your creativity to make sure that that happens. And let's all just work together to make sure that we deliver for nature, and bringing the different partners together. We are greater than the sum of our parts.
It's great. Thanks so much, Mary. I'm aware we've really only scratched the surface. It's a huge brief you've got, and DEFRA, which is sometimes considered to be a kind of small department, is really quite a big department now. All the EU stuff was repatriated to the UK, and the salience of DEFRA, the issues DEFRA deals with, have just grown and will continue to grow. So this is a huge agenda. It's just the beginning of a conversation. A lot of it, obviously, Green Alliance is working on circular economy, farming, land use, the Dasgupta report I mentioned. So if you're new to Green Alliance, do talk to colleagues here and see if we can work together. But it's been really refreshing hearing you, Mary, and you've got such great expertise in this area, including enough expertise to know how complex it is and how difficult the answers are. But it's just so welcome that the government wants to work with the sector and with business and everybody, rather than kind of closing in on itself and thinking it's got all the solutions. So really look forward to tackling some of these questions in the next 5 years. And huge thanks for coming and for your remarks.